If you've ever taken a writing class or simply taken an interest in writing fiction, then you've likely come across this piece of advice. Your character can't be too perfect. They must have some kind of major flaw. If your character is good at everything, they're unrelatable, uninteresting, or perhaps even the dreaded Mary Sue. While this is true in certain contexts, as I mentioned in this Patreon video essay, which you can watch for free, link below, I take issue with the implication that writing flawed characters is good writing, and writing seemingly perfect, hyper-competent characters is bad writing. Because the truth is, there are plenty of examples of popular characters who are, on paper at least, basically good at everything. Jadzia Dax from Star Trek Deep Space Nine is an excellent example of such a character. Not only is she highly intelligent, but also wise, serving as Sisko's confidant for much of the show, completely badass, being an expert in Klingon martial arts, but also strikingly beautiful, confident, socially popular, and is witty, charming, and funny. And yet, not only is Dax being hyper-competent not a hindrance to good storytelling, but it is in fact what facilitates many of her best episodes. And the same goes for many more hyper-competent characters we'll discuss later. One area where you can become hyper-competent is web design, thanks to today's sponsor Squarespace. Yes, that's really the segue. For any aspiring content creators or business owners, Squarespace is the best way to carve out a space of your own online. Whether you're just starting out or managing an existing brand, Squarespace provides everything you need to create a beautiful website to engage with your audience, sell products, host content, and much more. With Squarespace, you don't need to be an expert at writing code. Simply select from dozens of pre-made flexible templates. Once you've found one to your liking, Squarespace's Fluid engine allows you to customize your site as much or as little as you want. I've been using Squarespace to build a website for my production company Galaxy Class Pictures, which is now live, and I have to say I'm more than happy with the results. While the website I built is quite simple for now, I know Squarespace has everything I need to expand on it in the future. Follow the link in the description to start making your own website with your own domain name and use the promo code Rowan J. Coleman for 10% off your first purchase. Thank you once again to Squarespace for helping me keep the lights on over here. And now, on with the video. One of the most common objections I see to hypercompetent characters is that they're somehow unrealistic. Firstly, who cares about realism? We're creating characters, not psychoanalyzing real people. A character in a story will never come close to reaching the complexity of a real person, and they don't have to. Characters serve a function within a story. That is their primary purpose. Context and creative intention are important considerations here, but if one's issue with hypercompetent characters is that they're unrealistic, then that's an arbitrary standard being imposed onto the story rather than the viewer attempting to meet the story on its own terms. Oftentimes, what a person deems realistic writing tells you more about them than the story they're critiquing. Some people straight up don't believe anyone can be as morally perfect as Captain America or Superman, but that's a personal belief, not an appeal to realism. The same applies to hypercompetent characters. Dax refuses to fit into tropes based on her skill set. She's a scientist, but she isn't shy or nerdy. She's a badass, but she's not a stoic warrior. She's a party animal, but she never shirks her responsibilities to her crew. I think it's ironic that those who criticize hypercompetent characters as being unrealistic seemingly view everything through the lens of an RPG character creator. There are no finite skill points here. There doesn't need to be a trade-off between skills one wants to learn and personal growth. It's not true for people, and it certainly isn't true for character writing. Another common objection to hypercompetent characters is that if they're good at everything, their stories will be boring. However, this implies that the only kind of conflict a story can have is external conflict. The protagonist has to get stronger, acquire better tools, learn a new skill, etc. While these kinds of conflicts can be compelling, they're only at their best when tied into an internal conflict. Neo beating Agent Smith in a fight isn't cathartic because he learns more kung fu, it's because he finally believes in himself. Batman doesn't defeat Bane because he's practiced MMA harder, it's because he finally overcame the despair that was consuming him. The greatness of hypercompetent characters is that they've essentially already overcome these kinds of external conflicts, which means their stories are driven by internal conflict. Dax has a great many impressive skills, which is why Dax-focused episodes repeatedly place her in situations which can't be solved by them. Blood Oath is not about Dax showing Kang, Koloth and Kor that she can fight. It's about showing them she's still committed to the cause and willing to risk her Starfleet career to fulfill Curzon's oath. Rejoined never hinges on whether Dax will be able to help Lenara with her experiment, it hinges on her willingness to sacrifice everything she holds dear to be with the woman she loves. For other examples of this kind of character writing, see Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop, and basically every protagonist ever written by Bernard Cornwell. Now some of you may be thinking, yes, these are all hypercompetent characters, but their skill set is balanced out by a notable personal flaw, which is why I have to bring up Superman again. Here is a character who is both highly skilled to the point of basically being unstoppable, and morally good to the point of being a near saint. And yet, Superman's stories are still driven by layered emotional and ideological internal conflicts.
The great thing about Superman is even when you can juggle stars, Lois Lane can undermine them with one cruel word. And that was what was powerful about it for me, was the fact that's why we made him even more powerful than ever, because everybody kept saying, you can't write a Superman story, because if he can do anything, then what conflicts are there? And I thought, well, emotional conflicts, the biggest ones, the things we all understand.
The best Superman stories have nothing to do with whether he can or can't lift a big thing. They're ideological conflicts where his hopeful, optimistic worldview is challenged by the very people he wants to help, or they're deeply personal tales about what he'll leave behind for the world and his loved ones before he dies. At face value, Superman is the very embodiment of a Mary Sue, but his many strengths, both external and internal, are the reasons his stories work, not problems which have to be overcome. However, there is another use for hypercompetent characters, which is simply to be impressive rather than relatable. These are characters like James Bond, Batman, Riddick, and Conan. For the most part, their stories are designed to excite, thrill, and impress the audience. These are characters who are so highly skilled, so hypercompetent, that it almost places the writers in competition with the characters. How will they get out of this one is the primary question which drives their plots, as opposed to how are they feeling. It's their personalities which keep us invested. The point is that hypercompetent characters can be a great tool when used in the right kind of story. Characters who are seemingly too perfect should not be dismissed as inferior to notably flawed characters. One type of character is not superior to another. It all depends on context. Hypercompetent characters can facilitate rich personal stories or simply act as drivers of thrilling adventures. Whether they be space adventurers, historical warriors, superheroes, spies, or barbarians, they have many virtues a writer can utilize. So the next time you're coming up with your characters and are worried they're too skilled or too moral, perhaps try embracing the hypercompetent character and see what you come up with. Wow, I can't believe I got through this entire video about highly skilled characters and Mary Sue's. I didn't even mention Rey from Star Wars. Yeah, I should probably leave that one alone. Thanks for watching, guys. This video was sort of an expansion on similar points I made in this video, which is exclusive to Patreon, but is not behind a paywall. You can now join my Patreon as a free member, where you can see more exclusive video essays and audio commentaries. You can also, at any time, upgrade to a paid tier, where you can see videos early, ad-free, and uncut. The link is down below. Speaking of which, I'd like to quickly thank all of my patrons who are now appearing on screen, with an ultra thanks to Extreme Streamers, Tom, Dusk, Colin Camille, Patrick Fleming, Matthew Camille, Ed Mark Star, Dylan Thomas, Lilac Yane, Howard Craig Akervik, and Kajing G. Thanks again for watching, have a good one, and as always, live long and prosper.